Well, it looks like we've got 61 of you already, and I'd love to get started just because your time is so important. And before I make some welcoming remarks, and I'm Supervisor Candace Anderson, I happen to be this year's chair of the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors, and I want to very much welcome you to our Envision 2020 Zoom dialogue, seminar, participation, all the rest. But I do want to just at the outset just share my thoughts, Board of Supervisors, of what has happened over these last 2 weeks. All of us were saddened, shocked, disgusted, and by the actions of police officers in Minneapolis that took the life of George Floyd. We adjourned our meeting yesterday in his honor, and I just want to articulate how Black Lives do matter in Contra Costa County. We have been, it's not just a hashtag we're using right now because it's a trending topic. It's something that's been important to us for many years. And in our county, we have been addressing racial inequality in our criminal justice system, in our hiring practices, in our provision of services. It's an ongoing effort and something we're working very, very hard on. And we continue to value the right to protest, to assemble, offer opinions as loudly as people need to, and where of course we draw the line, as so many of you may as well, is we really can't tolerate when protests are hijacked by individuals who use it as a shield to commit property crimes, acts of violence, vandalism. And thus we do unfortunately currently have a curfew in our county. We hope it won't go on very much longer, but I just wanted to put that out there because it is such an important topic that all of us are experiencing right now. So again, thank you for being here. Today we're here to collaborate and talk about 3 really important topics as we look at our general plan. They include environmental justice, community health, and sustainability, things that really weren't addressed in previous iterations of our general plans. And so when the Board of Supervisors initiated an update of our general plan and we looked at our long range plan for the future, we really directed staff to include these 3 topics, to weave them into the general plan as we talk about different areas in the community and different topics. Our current situation that we're in right now just shows how the health and safety of every community member, how related we are, how interdependent we are, how we really need to have communities that can rely upon one another in a crisis like we've been going through with the coronavirus. All of these concepts are things that are the right thing to do for each of our communities, and environmental justice is, of course, added by the state. It's a new legal requirement. However, I think we would have included it regardless. We need to continue to address a long history of injustice from many levels of government that people may not have even been aware were there, and thus the whole concept of implicit bias, even as we go through our general plan. We need to continue to look at how we're going to improve public health, and then how to prepare for and adapt to climate change. Through our general plan and through this process, we want to build trust, and listening is something I really value as a member of the Board of Supervisors. It's a very important step in this process that we're at right now with our updating of our general plan, but we're still very much in the beginning stages. And so we understand that our communities want to see changes, want to see improvements, and that's really what a general plan does for us. It gives us a roadmap to the future so we can really decide this is where we want to be. This is how we're going to get there. And as any project comes forward, we can see how it fits in with that general plan. So this is a change, a little bit of a change from business as usual for how we've approached general plans in the past. And we're excited to have so many of you here today, advocates and our community members, advocates and community members who have been doing this work for many, many years, generations in fact, and some of you may be newer to it, but you're going to bring a lot of vital energy, some new ideas. And so I just want to thank you for sharing your time, your knowledge, your expertise with us. And I know there's an amazing program planned today to really receive your input. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. We appreciate you welcoming this group, and it's wonderful to have so many attendees. We did a physical meeting last year, and we have a lot more attendees in this virtual setting. So we're really pleased to have everyone here. My name's John Kopchik. I'm the Director of the Department of Conservation and Development, and I'll just mention that you know, this is really important work for those of us who work at the county. We've many of us have worked here for a couple decades, but even when we started, the general plan was already an old document. So this is a once in a career and probably once in a lifetime opportunity to rewrite the vision for our county. And with all the things going on in our world right now that Supervisor Anderson mentioned, it's really a bright spot for my day, and I think for our staff also, to be engage with the community to talk about how we make our, you know, not just how we heal, but how we envision an even better Contra Costa County. So thanks everybody for being here. We have a number of different staff here from Contra Costa County, and maybe they could all just wave. If you're a county staff member like me, maybe you could just wave. And then if you're a member of our wonderful professional consulting team, PlaceWorks, if you could wave. Thank you, everyone. We'll all be playing a role, trying to stay out of the way, but helping facilitate and take notes during the breakout group. So this meeting is really for you. And with that, I'll turn it over to the person who's going to set the stage for us, who is the lead the lead planner working on our general plan project, and that's Joanna Jansen. So take it away, Joanna.
Thank you so much, John. First, I do just want to make sure that you're all aware this meeting is being recorded so that we can share it later with folks who aren't able to attend right now. And I want to thank Supervisor Anderson and John for your warm welcome, and thank you all for being here and sharing your time with us this afternoon. I also want to introduce Lindsay Klein, my colleague at PlaceWorks, who's going to be helping kind of administer this call today, and let you know that we do have folks on hand to respond to any technical questions you're experiencing. If you're having issues with Zoom, there is a person, her name is Janet Chang, but she's designated here as Zoom questions, ask me. So in the chat menu, you can find Zoom questions and go there with any technical difficulties. Lindsay, do we have any unlinked phone numbers we need to address?
We do not.
Okay, great. So then quickly as we start, we're just going to ask you to participate in a quick poll, and Lindsay is going to launch that now. So go ahead and take just a couple seconds to tell us a little bit about yourself, and what's kind of your context for participating in this meeting today. You can pick all that apply. This is a 3-question poll. So when you go, if you've done 1, you can go on to number 2, which just asks us a little bit about the geographic representation that we're getting from across the county today. And then finally, we want to find out people's kind of familiarity level and comfort level with Zoom, this technology that we're using, and whether folks would appreciate a kind of an overview. All right, so just glancing through here, and don't worry if you didn't get a chance to get all the way through. This isn't scientific or anything, you know, particular. We just wanted to get a glimpse here. So it looks like we have both residents and community organization representatives and other local government representatives, which is great. We've got folks from across the county, east, west, and central parts of the county, and let's see, I'm not sure we got a complete response, but 100% of the people who responded said that you're familiar with Zoom. So that's useful for us. We were going to spend time going over a little bit about how to use Zoom, but I'm gonna assume that folks are familiar with it. If you're like me, you've been on a lot of Zoom meetings over the past couple of months. So we can dive right into the material of our meeting. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. And again, don't worry, that's nothing official, so it's okay if you weren't able to complete that. All right, so then let me just take a moment here and start sharing my screen so you can see the presentation. If there's anyone who's just calling in to this meeting and is not joining through the Zoom format, then you will, hang on just a second, you will not see this presentation, but hopefully you can follow along with my narration. All right. So this is, again, this project is about Contra Costa County's Envision Contra Costa 2040 project, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. But I want to start off reiterating the messages already shared by Supervisor Anderson and Director Kopchik, that you are welcome here and that we are very grateful, and that we understand that you and the communities that you work with may be drained and exhausted and saddened and frustrated and dealing with many different issues right now, a global pandemic, police violence in our communities. So thank you. With everything else going on, we really appreciate how much it means for you to be here. Thank you very much for that. These are the Zoom slides, which I said I'm not going to go through because we had indication that folks are pretty familiar with this platform. And again, if you have questions, contact the Zoom questions on the chat. So today we're going to have a brief presentation by me, which is starting right now. Then we're going to have time for some questions and answers about the project specifically. And the bulk of our time today is really going to be about the small group breakout sessions where we're going to be sharing knowledge with each other, and where county staff and us as the consultant team are really going to be listening and taking notes for how we can bring your knowledge into these documents. Then at the end of the meeting, we'll hear back from each one of the groups. Given the number of folks we have participating and the number of groups we anticipating having, that may mean that we need to stay a little bit after our advertised end time of 4:45 p.m. So we understand if that's not possible for you, but we do think it's important to allow the opportunity for everybody to hear back. And just close with a brief overview of next steps. And as we get started, I just want to acknowledge that, as John said, we're really excited by the number of folks who could participate today. Right now we have over 70 people participating. We had originally planned this as another face-to-face meeting, and it's fantastic to see the turnout that we're getting in a different venue. But I just want to be upfront with you that this is a technology that we are still learning, and we're trying to figure out all of the best ways that we can adapt this to collaboration and conversation. So this is still something that we're learning and testing and trying to grow with. So I just hope that you can bear with us as we figure out the ways that we can best make this technology meet your needs and our needs as we hear from you. So thank you in advance for your patience. Envision Contra Costa 2040 is the name that we have given to a large and important project that will result in 4 planning documents that you see here on the screen. And we're gathering your thoughts and feedback and ideas for these 4 documents specifically. First, I want to be clear that this project covers only the unincorporated county. So sometimes when we talk kind of in casual conversation about Contra Costa County, we mean everything inside the borders of the county. This plan and these documents are specifically about the unincorporated area. All of the individual cities have their own plans and their own decision-making processes. So these are plans that will affect only the unincorporated area and that will ultimately be adopted by the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors. The 3 plans that are part of Envision Contra Costa 2040 are the general plan, the zoning code, and the climate action plan. And then on all of these, we're going to do an environmental impact report or an EIR that looks at their potential impacts on the physical environment. So these 3 plans, the 3 vertical boxes you see, the general plan, the zoning code, and the climate action plan, all shape the physical structure and the social fabric of our communities. These are the plans that guide what kinds of projects can be approved and where different concentrations of land uses or types of industry or types of infrastructure are located, as well as where amenities like parks and trails are located, access to healthy and fresh food, access to safe and affordable housing. All of those types of topics are things that are covered and affected very directly by these documents. The general plan, more specifically, as Supervisor Anderson said, is really kind of the roadmap for the county to guide development and conservation in the unincorporated county. This plan was last updated in the early 90s, was last comprehensively updated in the early 90s, which means that a lot of the ideas and the thinking that underlie the current general plan reflect the 1980s. So it's pretty far out of date at this point. There may be some very fundamental guiding principles that are still relevant, and those certainly would be carried forward, but there's a lot of rethinking and retooling that we need to do to bring this document up to a level where it provides meaningful guidance for the 21st century. You've already heard that the supervisors have directed us to include 4 main themes in that update: environmental justice, sustainability, community health, and economic development. So those are themes that are going to be woven throughout the plan and inform every single one of its components. The Climate Action Plan, or CAP, is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the county from sources over which the county has control, including transportation, energy use, solid waste disposal, construction equipment, agriculture, greenhouse gases from sources like that. The zoning code guides what can happen on individual sites, and that might include everything from how close your home or your windows can be to your property line, to how many parking spaces you need to provide if you're opening a business, to regulations that protect health and safety around industrial operations. And again, the Envision Contra Costa 2040 project is looking at comprehensive updates to all 3 of these important planning documents. We need to make these updates to the documents not only because they're the right thing to do, which they are, but also because there's a number of new legal requirements that have come online that the county needs to respond to. One of the most important of those is Senate Bill 1000, or SB 1000, which requires the county to address environmental justice in its general plan. Many of you are probably familiar with that concept, but I want to talk a little bit about it and define it a little bit. There's no single correct definition of environmental justice. You can see on this slide the state definition in Senate Bill 1000, but it could be as simple. You might have your own definition. Very simply put, to me, this is the concept that all people, regardless of their race, regardless of their income level, have the right to live, work, go to school, and worship in communities that are healthy and clean. So the law, SB 1000, recognizes that some communities, and these have been almost always communities of color, have experienced a combination of historic discrimination, negligence, and political and economic disempowerment, with the result that today they are struggling with both a disproportionate burden of pollution and health impacts, and also a disproportionate social and economic disadvantages like poverty or housing instability. So in these communities, Senate Bill 1000 terms those communities as, quote, disadvantaged communities. You may not feel like that's an accurate or a fair label for the communities in which you live or work, and that's understandable. We're using that term on this slide and in this presentation just to be accurate about the terminology that is used in this specific law that we're going to be responding to. So specifically what Senate Bill 1000 calls on us to do in these communities that have these overlays of impacts is to reduce pollution exposure and improve air quality, to provide public facilities that could be everything from basic sidewalks to more extensive infrastructure like flood control, to provide access to food that is affordable and nutritionally adequate, to provide safe and sanitary homes that are free from toxics like lead and asbestos, and that are also not overcrowded, and to provide, to promote physical activity. That means making sure that people can choose to walk or bike safely. Can mean making sure that there's access to parks and recreational facilities in our communities. It could mean access to waterfront, open space, creeks, and access to nature in our neighborhoods. All of those are ways of promoting physical activity. The law also talks about the importance of engaging these communities in decision making. These are not top-down solutions, but we need to really listen and come up with bottom-up solutions as we make policy changes. And then finally, it requires jurisdictions to prioritize improvements and programs that address the needs in disadvantaged communities, which have typically been neglected and deprioritized in the past. As part of SB 1000, the state developed several tools to help identify communities where these issues are occurring most strongly. And that looked at a whole range of different data sources to make that identification. So this slide shows a map of where these communities are in unincorporated Contra Costa County. North Richmond, Montalban Manor, Rodeo and Crockett, Vine Hill area north of Martinez, and Bay Point are all areas that meet the description under the law. We know that it's not an accident that these are the communities that are facing compounded negative impacts. These are places that have in the past are still living with the legacy of discriminatory policies by the federal government, by local housing owner HOAs, and by banks. So those policies both were used as a basis for denying home loans and public investments, and also directed heavy industry and major transportation corridors to a lot of these communities. And that's the context that we're living with today. Part of your discussion today will be to look at this map in more detail. You might have additional ideas about ways of identifying these communities. We're not constrained to the data sources that the state provides, but they're a good starting point for our discussion. I just want to say briefly a couple things about the county role. You're probably here because you want to make a difference in the future of the county. And you might be an individual, you might be a community-based organization or an advocate or an educator. And we all have a role that we can play in making important changes in our communities. So this slide is about what the county's role can be specifically. The county has the authority to regulate private land uses in the unincorporated county area. That includes approving or denying projects. And many of you might be here motivated by concerns about an individual project. And that's great because these documents that I'm talking about are the places that are going to provide guidance currently and in the future about where and how individual projects can be considered for approval. The county can impose conditions of approval under certain circumstances. The county implements their own projects and policies. And of course, the county can support efforts and programs by other governments like the cities in the county, nonprofit organizations, and community-based organizations. So the county certainly doesn't act alone, but it does have an important role to play. You might be familiar with the county's role in other contexts if you participate in any of these types of things, the roles that the county has. So things like fire stations, law enforcement, our courts, our libraries, the Women, Infant, and Children program, and weatherization programs that the county offers. All of those are other components of the county's operations, and they're important to understand, and they're certainly interrelated with the general plan, the zoning code, and the climate action plan. But in general, these are separate operations from the documents that we're talking about here today. But they are important pieces of the county's role that support improvements in our communities. I just wanted to touch briefly on the topic of refineries because we have done probably close to 36 meetings in person before shelter-in-place orders went into effect, and we heard a lot of those meetings, a lot of comments and a lot of concerns about refineries, so we wanted to just address that head on today as we get started. So all of the refineries in the county predate any of the existing planning documents. They were mostly built in the post-war era. So they're here, they're on the ground, they're existing uses, and that affects the extent to which the county can regulate them. The county is also limited by regulations from regional, state, and federal agencies that have purview over certain types of emissions from the refineries. So the county in general isn't really legally have the authority to regulate operations at the refineries. What the county does have authority over is individual building or modernization projects at the refineries. And those are a chance for the county to have some influence over what happens on these sites. The general plan, in addition, can address land uses around and near the refineries. The general plan is the place where we plan for transportation infrastructure that may be related to the refineries. And also, of course, emergency response planning, which is very relevant. The Climate Action Plan will include information on refinery greenhouse gas emissions within the county's borders. Very briefly, we did, as has been mentioned, have an in-person version of this same collaboration back in November in Richmond. And we heard from your neighbors out there about concerns about air quality impacts from refinery, concerns about climate change, sea level rise, inequitable transportation access, concerns about public safety power shutoffs, food and medical facility access, access to parks, recreation, and open spaces, displacement and gentrification, which is certainly something that we need to bear in mind as we talk about making positive change in these affected communities. And then health concerns, heart health, mental health, asthma. I think folks' concerns about respiratory health and physical health in general are only amplified by the COVID-19 situation. And as we see the very disparate impacts that that disease has had on communities of color. Finally, before we break out into our small groups, I want to make sure you understand that there are additional opportunities to contribute and to stay involved beyond today. EnvisionContraCosta2040.org is our website, and that's the best one-stop shop for you to find information, find out about future meetings like this one, submit comments, ask us questions, review things as we publish them and share them. So that will always be a resource for you throughout the course of this project. In addition, this county has a sustainability commission, a planning commission, and a board of supervisors, as well as the sustainability committee of the board of supervisors. All of those are groups that meet in public meetings, similar format to this kind of virtual meetings for the time being, but that are open to the public and provide opportunities for public comment. So those are other ways that you can stay informed and involved. So with that, we're gonna have just a few minutes to see if there's any questions that we need to clarify about the information that I've just shared and the Envision Contra Costa 2040 process as a whole. So given the number of participants that we have, we're asking for you to use the chat function. You should see that along the bottom of your screen as a little kind of dialogue bubble to submit your questions. And then we will respond to those as they come in. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen for right now so that we can see more of each other's faces.
So I've been monitoring the chat function, and I've received 2 questions related to the CAP that I'll pose. And just to reiterate, if you have a question that you'd like answered during this time, send them to me. I'm labeled Project Questions, Ask Me. So the first question we have asks what the time frame is for updating the Climate Action Plan. And maybe, Will, do you want to take that one?
Or I can take it as well. Will, do you have a preference? I'm Jody London. I'm the County Sustainability Coordinator, and I'm working with Will Nelson, who has the lead on this larger project, on the update of the Climate Action Plan. And the 2 documents are linked together. If you go to the Envision Contra Costa 2040 website, you will see the documents that we've prepared to date. We had a series of meetings last fall. And Will, is there anything you want to add on that?
Just as far as time frame goes, obviously the pandemic has thrown our schedule out of whack, and you know, our intention is to adopt the Climate Action Plan with the general plan. We had been aiming toward to the end of 2020. We currently don't have a new schedule, so we have a couple items that we're working on that really drive that schedule, and when they're finished, we'll be able to have a better sense of when this will be finished. The whole project will be finished, but it's not going to be until sometime in 2021 at this point.
Great. And another question about the Climate Action Plan asks, will the updated Climate Action Plan compile the greenhouse gas emissions from refined products, even if it is not used within the county? In other words, what is the global greenhouse gas footprint from the Contra Costa County refineries?
This is Jody London again. I'll take a first cut at that, and then I may also ask Tammy Seal with PlaceWorks to assist me. We do have the county greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We're putting the final touches on that, and we will be making that available hopefully in the next few weeks. And it does include emissions from the large industrial facilities. I don't know if it gives the level of breakdown that the questioner was asking about. Tammy, did I accurately capture that?
We may pull in more people to help answer this question, but the county does have, as Jody mentioned, a greenhouse gas emissions inventory that follows a community standard protocol. It will not include global emissions as noted in the question. We will identify the refineries as stationary sources and be able to provide emissions for them as reported as an informational item. But any other related effects of the refineries, any other greenhouse gas emissions could be picked up in the state's inventory or other inventories, but not in the county's inventory to the level of detail asked in the question. That currently isn't state protocol, and the county does not have jurisdiction over emissions outside of the county.
Okay, and then we also have a couple questions kind of also related to the Climate Action Plan. The one question says, I see no mention of oil drilling in the Climate Action Plan. What are your intentions? And another asks or notes that the current county general plan actively encourages oil wells on agricultural land. Can we put an end to this? So does anybody want to, Will or Jody, want to take this one?
I was going to ask Jody, would you like to address the Climate Action Plan part of that?
Yeah, can you restate it, please? I was listening to all of it and I lost the first part.
So the first part, it says, I see no mention of oil drilling in the Climate Action Plan. What are your intentions? Yeah,
to my knowledge, there is very little actual oil drilling in the county. So I think those emissions might be captured somewhere in there, and I would have to ask my friends from PlaceWorks who are more familiar with the specifics of the inventory. But I don't know that there's a lot of emissions to capture. Tammy, do I have that correct?
Yes, I mean, we do not, in this inventory, account for those emissions. So.
I think the question is, do they exist? And to the extent that they do exist, are we capturing them? And if not, can we capture them? If I was the questioner, that's where I would go with that question.
We capture, report it for oil-related oil production activities to the extent that those are generally stationary sources and permitted either by the air district or a jurisdiction, and those are reported emissions, and we have those available as an informational item in the greenhouse gas emissions inventory.
Okay.
And then the second part of that about the general plan itself and the section that addresses oil and gas well drilling. As was mentioned in the presentation, the current document reflects thinking from 3+ decades ago. And so one of our goals is to bring the document into alignment with 21st century thinking and values. I can't say right now that it won't address oil and drilling. You know, it is a public document, and there are people in the county who pursue that. And so it's something though that we're definitely aware of. It's a very small section of the general plan right now. And we have a project happening right now that has made a lot of people aware that this goes on in Contra Costa County. And so definitely something we're going to be looking at, but I can't say at this point what the final document will say.
I think, Will, I could just add to that. We're going to be going into our knowledge sharing conversations in just a few moments and asking about some of these issues that are of concern. Certainly now is a great time to start those conversations. If you believe that you would like to see that policy change in the general plan, this is one place to start sharing those ideas, hearing from your neighbors, and working together to make some policy proposals that we can include in draft documents that are ultimately going to be considered, and those revisions can be considered by your decision makers. But we'd love to include those ideas in the conversation as they're generated by our community members and stakeholders.
Okay, so our next question asks, is there an effort to harmonize county and city plans?
I'm not sure if that's talking about all of the plans. The general plan, for sure. There are parts of the county that are unincorporated but are within areas called the spheres of influence of the various cities, where they definitely would have input, would have opinions about what our general plan said for those areas. So we'll definitely be engaging the cities. It is also part of the requirement of state law regarding general plans that we speak to the cities as we're developing the document. We haven't started that yet because we want to get to the point where we have a draft of a new land use map so that we actually have something to show people and to begin the discussion. And as far as the climate action plan, I might punt this a little bit to Jody, but it really, as was mentioned, it's a climate action plan for the unincorporated part of the county. So Jody, is there?
Well, actually, we do have a lot of collaboration on the emissions inventory through a partnership that we have been in for many years. It's about to end. We've joined with Alameda County, and so all of the cities in Alameda and Contra Costa counties, as well as the two counties themselves, have been using the same methodology for probably 90%, 85 to 90% of the emissions. So we have that baseline that's pretty standard, and we're going to continue to work to make sure that we can have that collaboration, because we felt it's important to have that apples to apples piece when you're going between cities and counties in the region.
Okay, so we're just about out of time for our Q&A. I'm going to pose one more question, but if your question didn't get answered, or if you have more questions, you can feel free to continue to send them to me, and we can stick around after the meeting has officially ended and continue the Q&A if you'd like to do that. So don't worry if we didn't get to your question during this time frame. So the last question we're going to answer for now is, it asks, since there are 4 areas of overlay, I think related to the general plan themes, why do these meetings only address 3 and not address economic development?
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to begin a response to that, and please, Will, or anybody else jump in. Yeah, absolutely. Economic development is very much on the table, and clearly when we talk about issues like environmental justice and sustainability and community health, it is also interrelated. So we wanted to really be clear about the intentions behind this meeting, and also to really reach out very directly to advocates and stakeholders who are doing work around these topics in the county. And so we picked those 3 topics as kind of the most directly relevant, and to make sure that we're covering those. But economic development is absolutely part of this conversation. Please share your ideas about economic development, how it can be done equitably in the county, how it intersects with these other issues. I know from your work you have really clear ideas about how that's happening now and how it might need to be different in the future. So that topic is definitely included today, even though it's not part of our formal meeting name, which was already getting kind of long.
I think that's going to wrap up our Q&A portion. As I said, we'll stick around after the meeting ends around 4:45 or so and continue to answer questions. So feel free to continue to send them to me.
Great, thank you, Tanya. And so then I think what we want to get to now, what we're kind of most excited about, is the more collaborative part of this collaboration, where we're going to be going into some breakout groups in Zoom. Let me just tell you a little bit about that, and then we will start off with that part of the meeting. So to do that, I am going to share my screen again. Okay, so we're in just a few minutes, we're all going to move into small groups and breakout rooms where we can talk to each other in a way that's not really possible with 76 of us all here at one time. And we're going to work in small groups to respond to some questions. These questions that your facilitator is going to have and that you're going to see displayed on another person sharing their screen are just meant as prompts to start the conversation. So we chose these questions because they're very directly related to the work that we're doing on the documents that I've been talking about. But we are aware that you might bring your own ideas about issues that are important to address. If they're not captured in those questions, that's okay. We want to hear all of your thoughts and ideas and your wisdom today. So even if it doesn't seem to fall neatly within the question, please make sure to raise it if it feels important to you. We have also asked your facilitator to help you and the group as a whole stay on track so that we can get through these questions and so that everyone in the group has an opportunity to share at least a little bit. And near the end of your discussion, we're going to ask you to just regroup and get prepared to report back to us. We do have a group that's going to be, that is able to be conducted entirely in Spanish, if that is your preference. And so please, right now, take a moment to message Lindsay if you want to be in group number 7, which is going to be our Spanish speaking group. And Lindsay is on my screen right now. So she's Lindsay, L-I-N-D-S-E-Y. Please send her a chat if you want to be in the Spanish speaking group. For all of our groups, we are going to follow, I hope that we can agree to follow these basic guidelines for a conversation. Speak from your own experience, listen to understand each other, respect differences. If you hear things that are different from what you expected or that you disagree with, be curious about those and seek to find out more. Please do let everyone participate. I think we're going to have about 7 or 8 people in each group, so we are going to need to share the time, step up, step back. And just know that your questions are valuable. If you don't have an idea or a solution right now, that's okay too. Please do continue to pose questions because those can also further our conversation. I will show you again the next steps when we reconvene at the end. So for now, this part of the meeting, thank you very much for those discussions. I was very fortunate to get to be able to move around among our groups. And I heard some really great discussions. It's clear we have a lot of passion and a lot of knowledge here. So I'm very grateful that we can take advantage of that and integrate it into our process. This is a part of the meeting for you guys to share with each other what you talked about. So I would like for each group's spokesperson to be ready to give us a 2-minute summary of what you guys talked about. You don't have to say everything. You're not going to be able to say everything, but please just give us some highlights, especially places where you might hear differences between your group. But certainly we're really interested in finding areas of agreement as well. And this Google Docs place where we've been taking our notes, as well as the recording of this meeting, is all going to be on the county, the Envision Contra Costa website, envisioncontracosta2040.org. So that'll continue to be a record of the meeting after we close. So if we go through, if we each take about 2 minutes for our reports back, then we'll be done in about 15 minutes and we'll close with some next steps. So I'm just going to go through the groups in order, starting with group 1. And group 1 spokesperson, could you maybe raise your hand or Let us know who you are.
Are you going to share the Google Doc, Joanna?
Yes, we are. During the reports back, we're going to have that available to view.
Well, this is Daniel Barrios. I'm with Contra Costa County. Just wanted to say that Doreen Allen is our spokesperson,
Oh,
and
thank you, Daniel.
she is going to do great.
So Lindsay, unmute, delete, Doreen. We're going. The rest of us are going to stay muted so that there's no background and noise or difficulties hearing Doreen.
And Tanya is actually the one who I believe will be doing the unmuting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking for Doreen. Is it D-O? How do you spell
It is a D-E-R-E-N.
it? Oh, I see it. Okay. Sorry. Doreen.
Yeah,
Let me-
No problem.
You found me. Thank you so much. I was like trying to unmute and could not. But anyways, thank you all so much. And thank you to Daniel and Jamar for being our facilitators in group one. I'm going to do my best to try to capture everything that the group said. But in general, what we identified as environmental concerns ranged from air quality to rising temperatures and fire dangers, sea level rise, and access to food. We discussed possible solutions, looking at low tech, using things like, just planting more trees to try to find remedies to this. We also discussed how these environmental concerns have direct impacts on health, particularly in disadvantaged communities, things like, asthma and diabetes, and that these same communities also have challenges sometimes accessing healthcare. So we wanted to look at opportunities of providing innovative ways to access healthcare, perhaps through technology. But these same communities have challenges in accessing technology. So is there something that we can do to look at it from a systemic approach and provide, full service? In making our decisions as we move forward in terms of how to address these challenges in the environment and healthcare, it's really important that we look at all the decisions that we make and their impact on future generations. So really looking at it from more of a systemic perspective. And that perhaps there's an opportunity to learn from others, not only in the United States, but also globally, and incorporating some best-in-class solutions. And last but not least, it's really important for us all to keep in mind this sense of urgency in terms of making things happen and the role that we can each play individually. Thank you. And folks, is there anything that I left out there? They promised that they'd jump in.
Thank
I
you.
think you nailed that one.
Great work. Really appreciate it. Really good ideas there. All right, so for group two, I think we're going to go to Holly Hughes as our spokesperson.
Yes, we had a really great discussion in our group. And for the first question, one of the things that came up was illegal dumping and how that is impacting certain areas of the county much more so than other areas of the county. We also talked a little bit about sea level rise and being able to adapt and prepare for more flooding, just like in group one. So that was something that we talked quite a bit about. Asthma came up in just about, and so asthma and air quality came up just about in every question, and everything that we talked about was, that's kind of an overall overarching issue that kept coming up. So question two, some of the most pressing health concerns were access. This came up not only in access to actually getting healthcare, but access to clean water, access to clean food. So some of the things that we thought about were having a traveling clinic. Later on, we discussed, let's get some school nurses back in schools and making some of those school-based clinics more robust so that we can reach all members of our community. We talked about zoning and planning and making sure that we were emphasizing using renewable resources. But if we're really going to be emphasizing that, that also means that we need to de-emphasize our use of fossil fuels. So no new drilling, no new fossil fuel extraction activities in our county. and really making sure that we're paying attention and regulating what we can in our county with the existing oil drilling. We'd also like to see some more and better uses of our mass transit programs. So how do we make mass transit available for all? One of the things that came up with some of the most important issues that for climate change were wildfire. And again, that comes back to air quality, that comes back to making sure that all of our communities have access to healthcare. For the question 4, we thought that Bethel Island should have been added to that list because the island needs more assistance, and there's a lot of concern about zoning and building there. And we were very concerned about how sea level rise is going to impact the disadvantaged communities in our county. And then the last question, there were a lot of different things that we talked about. Alameda County has some ordinance to eliminate and reduce oil and gas drilling, and that's something that we'd like for our county as well. And zoning really, again, came up, and it's something that we have the ability to add to our plans. So making sure that our zoning rules are robust and supportive of social justice and climate issues is really important. So making sure that we're requiring solar panels, and we're requiring making sure that people who need AC especially here in the East County where it can get so hot, that's part of, that there are cooling centers and that there's AC. And again, we came up addressing homelessness issues and having a cohesive collaborative plan for addressing homelessness. And again, increased capacity for school-based clinics for access to healthcare throughout the county. So that's it.
Great. All right, thank you so much, Holly. Okay, we are going to move on to group 3, and I think we're going to hear from Jody.
Yes, group 3, the participants are suffering from Zoom fatigue this afternoon, so I'm going to step up for them. A lot of what we talked about in group 3 has already been said, but I want to make sure I mention that there's a lot of interest in our group in a moratorium on drilling in the county. There was also a lot of discussion about health impacts and who's affected by health, who's affected by pollution and other things, access to health care, having comprehensive solutions. So not just looking at one part of it, but looking at like using your data. So where do you have high emissions? Where do you have high health rates? How do you integrate transportation, employment, affordable housing, those types of things. We talked a lot, there was some mention of sea level rise. Also looking at economic development, there was some question about wanting to see economic development lifted up more in this conversation, particularly along the northern waterfront. And also thinking about whether there might be parts of a community that are disadvantaged, even if the entire census tract doesn't meet the definition that the city has put forward. So, throughout the county, we might have communities that are very close to a freeway or another pollution source, and the entire tract might not be impacted, but is there that level of disparity? And we also had some really interesting conversations about programs that the county might sponsor. So for example, could the county sponsor a community solar program? Could the county start to require businesses to install solar for community as they come in? Could we, I can't even read my own handwriting. How can we push more on MCE to help us out with getting more solar built out? And I will share with PlaceWorks in the group when this call is over a study that we did a couple of years ago on the potential for renewable energy in our county, particularly on rooftops and parking lots. So I think, and then also interest in trails and making it easier for people to bike and walk. That is it. Hopefully I didn't miss anything.
All right, great. Thank you, Jody. And I just, to answer a couple of questions there really quickly, one is that, yeah, certainly I think it's fine to consider identifying communities, impacted communities that are smaller than a census tract jurisdiction, a census tract boundary. A lot of data is collected based on census tract boundaries, but we know that sometimes there can be really big differences in between areas that are even inside the same census tract. So if we need to do a finer grained look at those communities, that's certainly something that's possible. Okay, so group 4 is next.
This is Ileana. I'm the group wanted me to speak up since I was doing the note taking. We didn't answer things question by question. The group decided that it was best to kind of just have a general discussion on concerns. So tried to fit things into the questions as appropriate as best we could. So for the first question, I think, with this being available, it's important to note that air quality, transportation, particulate matter, all of that was brought up. Health concerns with drilling, economic risks, and health and safety risks. The main focus really was on county influence and responsibilities, and them being very proactive with these issues. That was, all the environmental issues were, brought up as they normally are, but really just a focus on county participation in helping and being creative to limit exposure to certain risks. And then for the second question, it was brought up an effort to redefine eligibility of state programs with there being such a big difference in terms of how economic stances within the area. And so looking at local legislation and how to kind of fix that or help that situation, and really a focus on using the general plan for regenerative agriculture. That was a focus, and engagement of youth and incorporation of community gardens. And the group discussed that would help environmental justice concerns as well. And then you can go towards question 5. There was a discussion in terms of if there's going to be access to parks, a big focus on safety and making that space usable. So if there's a lot of greenery, people being able to actually sit somewhere, and people enjoying the experience. So having clean bathrooms and being mindful of landscaping that's safe to everybody around them. So people with wheelchairs, so that there's not vegetation dropping on them. And so, using this as a way for the community to feel more interconnected. And I think that was pretty much it.
Great. Thanks for that, Ileana. I appreciate that. We're going to just go a little bit out of order for the next report back. We're going to go to group 6, Urban Habitat. Has a representative here who's going to give that report back because they have to leave by 5. So thanks for staying a little bit late, and please go ahead, Urban Habitat.
Hi, this is Leslie Gordon with Urban Habitat. So we were concerned about air pollution and also the correlation between air pollution and asthma rates. So fossil fuels and drilling came up a couple of times in our conversation, and everyone was very much against increasing that kind of activity in the county. We wanted to see, I'm actually not totally sure if these are our notes.
Yeah, sorry, Leslie. I think we should actually be on group number 8, Lindsay. Sorry about that, Leslie.
Oh, I apologize. I was incorrect about which group this is representing. I'm sorry, that was my mistake.
That's okay. We started at air pollution too, so at first I thought it was. Okay, so like I said, oil drilling, air quality issues in Brentwood and in other parts of East County. We talked about wildlife corridor preservation and water quality, and we'd like to see some shoreline restoration in all parts of the county. In Bay Point in particular, residents are concerned about water and air quality, quality of their pipe system, asthma rates, lack of green space, and lack of open space along the waterfront. So I think we covered a lot of health concerns in our first question, but we did talk about other more specific health related scores like low birth rates and wanting the county to set really clear quantitative goals to make sure that we're improving those health conditions. We also talked about access to fresh and affordable food in Bay Point in particular, knowing that residents want more shopping options and community gardening and urban farming options. And we talked about taking an upstream approach to health where we remember that housing and a stable job and all of those really sort of key pillars of your life are also what lead to good health outcomes.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, are you done? Sorry.
Oh, well, we have more questions to go through, but I don't know if I have more time. Okay.
You just paused and I'm sorry.
As far as climate change, we talked about sea level rise, fires, heat islands. We'd really like to see organic and sustainable agriculture in the county. I think that's Brentwood in particular. Thinking more about water conservation, again, oil drilling and fracking came up. And then also just remembering that climate change impacts will exacerbate issues that are already present, particularly EJ issues that are already present in low-income communities and communities of color. And so that lens needs to be brought to any kind of climate change work. I don't think we had too much to say about the disadvantaged communities map, but I know that I'd like to take it back to a member-based group I work with to make sure that we're really capturing the nuances there. And, oh yeah, we didn't really get to talk about this question so much, but we talked about AB 617, volunteer projects, giving people a sense of ownership, air pollution, tree buffers, promoting solar and wind power. I know that Oakland specifically has an equitable climate action plan process happening now where equitable is just right in the title, which isn't the case in Contra Costa County. So that could be something to think about. And I also think that in terms of talking about creating a sense of ownership, there are ways to really formalize that through collective and cooperative structures. So if you have a land trust that has a community garden or an urban farm, or if you have a grocery store that's a cooperative, you're investing in people in multiple ways. And I think that's all. Thanks so much for skipping me ahead. I have to hop off now.
Thank you. Thanks, Leslie. Appreciate it. All right, so I think we're going to circle back to group 5. Linda, thank you very much for your patience, and thanks for being willing for us to let Leslie speak up before she had to leave.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Sure. This is Linda DeChambeau with Contra Costa Climate Leaders, speaking on behalf of our Group 5. I also am going to have to drop off here pretty quickly. So we'll go through this. A lot of things have already been said, but you know, the main EJ concern in our community in summary is the inappropriate or the lack of accessibility to parks, to transportation, to shuttles, to getting to jobs, and then an inappropriate exposure to contamination from industry, lack of buffers to drilling and industry, vehicle miles traveled, stuck in traffic or near traffic. You know, what is the most pressing health issue? Sure, we talk about asthma, but we discuss that the reality is the climate emergency is really the overarching health issue, and it leads to everything else, including asthma, that it's a crisis and an emergency, and it should be treated as such, that it can lead to flooding that has health consequences, particularly if it gets into our wastewater, our sewer plant, and influx of water coming in from the Delta to those sewer plants could have dire health consequences. Drought, access to heat centers, you know, obvious problems with air quality and exposure, again, to what can we do to bring down the vehicle miles traveled to reduce the air impacts. the greatest concern about climate change. We talked about the importance of maintaining our agricultural lands and encouraging or re-encouraging their use, and the importance of maintaining and taking a position on the urban limit line with or without the measures J and L that expires. It's important that we ask, in the general plan, that we keep that front and center, and to keep the climate emergency front and center and address it as the crisis that it is, and not just words that aren't going to, go anywhere. And I think examples along those.
Linda, I think you accidentally muted yourself. You said examples along.
Unmute. There we go. We have a white paper coming out soon where we looked at Contra Costa County cities. I'm interested in what was mentioned earlier about Oakland and equitable climate action, et cetera. But in our county, we've reviewed all of the general plans and have links to all of them. And summary, Richmond is a very good one to look at. Brentwood and Oakley are not very good ones. Interesting is that Brentwood has some very strong language, but no action. So it's important that as we go through this process, if we develop a good plan, it has to have good implementation. We want to be, walking the talk. We want to ensure clear language in the general plan that forces us to truly keep this up and walk the talk and actually make this happen and address it in the manner that this climate crisis emergency deserves.
Thanks for that, Linda. And Lindsay, if we could just scroll back up really quick before we go on to the, I think I heard Linda say that the city of Richmond was a good example. And so I just want to make sure we're accurately reflecting that in the notes. Is that accurate, Linda? Linda, you're muted. I don't know if you're able to respond.
That's our opinion at this point. They have some very strong measurable language that requires annual review, and it's one I would highly suggest we consider aligning with.
Okay, so that should say good example. All right, we're correcting that now. Thank you, and thanks to our note takers. I know you had a lot of input to capture in a document that was experiencing some lags for some of you, so thanks. Okay. We're gonna move on to group 6. We have 3 more groups to hear from. So we're gonna hear from John, then Zoe, and then Doug will wrap it up. Go ahead, John.
Okay, so yeah, to previous people's points, a lot of this has been covered in great detail by everyone. So a lot of what we're gonna see here is going to be very similar. I'll say there was kind of an overarching narrative to our discussion, which was acknowledging the unfortunate legacy within Contra Costa of kind of, enabling super polluters, from the chemical plants to the refineries to the military munition disposal areas, et cetera. And also not so distant legacy, so as recent as the 90s, of actively and currently encouraging the drilling of oil and natural gas on county land. The Bay Area is supposed to be a shining example to the country and to the rest of the world about being stewards of the environment, being forward looking. So what we want to encourage is to not just take small steps to get up to an adequate level, but to go beyond that and actually be that example, which we, unfortunately, Contra Costa County have not always been. So that's the kind of the overarching narrative. Along with everybody else, our key points that we focused on were climate change and homelessness. So here we talk about some of the same details that you heard earlier around, air pollution, there's water concerns, asthma, et cetera. We talked about oil drilling quite a bit. It sounds like everybody else talked about oil drilling too. I think it's it's a surprise to a lot of people in the Bay Area that it exists, and it seems like it doesn't exist, but it does, and it's actively expanding right now. So we need to put a stop to that. And we can go to the next slide. Sorry, I'm just getting up to speed on this. So yeah, a lot of the same topics around parks, healthy, so clean water, clean air, asthma, et cetera. A lot of the same topics were listed by other people here. And again, reliable housing, homelessness. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, the group, I feel like, had very strong feelings about climate change becoming almost the issue in a couple of decades from now, that ties to all of these things. And it's really, obviously we want to focus on prevention of climate change, but recognizing that, you know, this county is a small pinprick in the world of contributors towards climate change. And if you look at most of the analysis, it's not going to be possible to completely stop climate change at this point. It's just how bad is it going to be past that point? So we also do need to focus on mitigation, which again, I heard the other groups talk about as well, such as sea level rise, droughts, wildfires, heat, etc. And, you know, the vulnerable populations, which again ties into homelessness, which we're going to see increasing. We already are seeing it increasing here in the Bay Area because of the housing crisis, but the pandemic has led to mass unemployment. So we really need to be conscious of the homelessness, especially if we go into the next slide. We talk about the map of where people are. This, you know, we're focusing on unincorporated, so there's not a lot that we can address right here, because a lot of the populations obviously exist in incorporated portions of the county. But what we are seeing is, because the homeless are in RVs, for example, they're mobile. They're going to go to where they keep on getting kicked out and pushed to the edges of cities, which is unincorporated county. So I think a lot of what needs to be focused on is how to address this surge of homelessness, which is only probably going to get bigger when we address with these problems here. Is there another slide after this? So we talked about good examples. So the previous group talked about Richmond being a good example. We captured that as well, but also looking outside of the state. So Hawaii is on the road to becoming completely energy self-sufficient, so are other countries, such as Iceland and different parts of Scandinavia, et cetera. So it is possible to be energy self-sufficient. And I know that we talked with MCE, and MCE is trying to roll out energy storage. Energy storage is critical to becoming energy self-sufficient, because you can cover the whole county in solar panels, but if you can't store it, you can't use any of that at night. So with that, you know, production and storage have to come hand in hand. So hopefully we can dedicate resources to that, instead of dedicating resources to the continuing drilling of oil and gas in the county. And I think that pretty much covers up. That's the last slide. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well done. Thank you very much, John. Really appreciate that succinct summary. Okay, Zoe Sliegel is going to report back from group 9, and then Doug Lovell from group 10 following that. Go ahead, Zoe.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'll be brief. So our group talked a lot about, you know, sea level rise, air quality, food access, the risk from fire, toxics, and, you know, greenhouse gas reductions. And definitely I want to emphasize the just transition away from refineries. You know, we talked about mitigating the historic and current toxic uses adjacent to frontline communities through brownfield cleanup and buffer zoning for open space in and around disadvantaged communities. We also talked about having a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for both community-wide and county-wide operations. It's really reviewed and adjusted on an annual basis. And, you know, we couldn't really, you know, at least, you know, we talked about a lot of different, you know, climate priorities. And I think one of the biggest ones is just making sure that the actions laid out in the climate action plan are translated into the general plan, and then they're actually implemented. And so, you know, we want to make sure there's accountability and transparency to the goals laid out, and some sort of systematic review of the progress and associated metrics that are transparent and continue to engage the community in the years to come. We also highlighted the city of Richmond as well as an example to look at, and, you know, really talked about how it's so critical to coordinate with the cities within Contra Costa County on this work, so that you're not reinventing the wheel each time, and that all of our work can be amplified. I'd say that's it.
Okay, great overview. Thank you very much for that, Zoe. Okay, group 10, Doug Lovell. You're still with us?
I am.
Fantastic, thank you.
Boy, what to add? beyond what's already been covered. Maybe the environmental justice issues around domestic wells in unincorporated Contra Costa County hasn't been brought up for drinking water quality. I didn't hear the consumption of contaminated shellfish and finfish by the disadvantaged communities. And then the convergence of climate change and sea level rise are going to put these major industrial facilities and their hazardous and toxic waste subject to catastrophic flooding. And people didn't bring up that devastating impact. I think I just heard some mention of the just transition, but there's going to be some lower income staff associated with the fossil fuel industry and the area-wide support associated with the fossil fuel industry, and those jobs are going to need some government transition assistance so that those communities are not disproportionately impacted, and not only the workers themselves, but the families that are dependent upon that. And I possibly know that, for example, the city of Berkeley is pursuing explicitly some funding of the just transition principle. And then I'll just repeat what other people said with respect to no more fossil fuel exploration, no new wells or new extraction, no newer expanded pipelines, no expanded refinery capacity, and give some serious thought to how the big industrial and chemical facilities, the fossil fuel oriented facilities, will be reclaimed so that they don't become unincorporated Contra Costa County's brownfields 20 years or 30 years from now. And I think that's it. And it was a pleasurable breakout session for us.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that experience, Doug, and the ideas that you guys covered. I appreciate you bringing in some new ideas here as well at the end. And I really appreciate your closure with looking ahead 20 or 30 years in the future, because that's definitely a big part of what these documents are supposed to do. So many of us try every day to just keep up with what's right in front of us that needs to be taken care of. And so these plans and documents are really important part, a moment, an opportunity to step back and look farther ahead, just as you alluded to. So thank you for that. That's a really valuable perspective to share. I said that I would just close out with making sure that you understand the next steps in this process. So let me share my screen one last time to do that. We are still, let's see, I want to make sure that that's the full screen. There we go. This is still very much a process that's underway. You, the organizations that you represent, your friends and neighbors all still have opportunities for input here. So we're going to be continuing these conversations. I think for the time being, it does look like meetings of any size, certainly a gathering of this size, would need to happen online. So again, I'm glad that that could be productive for you today. And I appreciate your patience and your tolerance of some of the barriers around the technology. We're going to keep trying to get better on that. But I'm glad that we were able to have some productive conversations. We're going to move into countywide policy development next. Those are policies and strategies for both the general plan and the climate action plan. as well as starting to explore provisions for the zoning code. We will be going through processes of sharing those policies with you and getting your feedback and thoughts and refining them before we put together and publish the public review draft documents, the draft general plan, the draft climate action plan, and the draft zoning code. As Will said earlier, the timeline for these publication of these draft documents is not set right now. The health situation and the shelter in place does present challenges for us. We are working through those and adapting, but it's affecting the swiftness with which we can do this work and commit to a schedule. So as it goes on, we're trying to make, adapt to this and get a little bit more concrete timeline put together that acknowledges this interruption but keeps us moving forward. So please, again, check envisioncontracosta2040.org for updates on our schedule and as we have things available and as we schedule follow-up conversations to build on and take the next steps with some of the great ideas that you've shared with us here today. And that website also has a lot of background information already, including a vulnerability assessment for the county that looks at issues of sea level rise, coastal flooding, heat island effects, a lot of the issues that you guys have raised here today. So check out envisioncontracosta2040.org. Please sign up there for updates if you haven't already. There are other places on that website where you can share additional ideas or comments and where you can participate in a virtual open house on your own time. So if you have friends or colleagues who weren't able to participate today, please visit the website and look for other ways of giving us input there. This is not your last or your only opportunity. But again, let me just close by thanking you finally one more time for your time and your energy. We've run considerably over the time when we had thought we would end, and I think that's just a sign of how much there is to talk about around these issues, and also how much energy you're bringing to these topics. So thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your afternoon.
Before we go, okay, sorry, I just wondering if we wanted to do any of these additional questions, or because we've gone so long, are we going to publish them separately?
Yeah, thanks. No, I think we said we would have that opportunity. So if you're still here and you did have questions that you didn't have a chance to get answered, please go ahead and put those in the chat. We did say we would offer that opportunity, so I want to uphold that.
Okay. Well, I have a list of questions that I've been collecting since our Q&A ended before, so I'll jump in. There's a few questions that I have just about the kind of process and the project. One is asking if the public has access to the data being considered in these planning documents, such as spatial distribution of county green space, open space, health afflictions, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I can start there. We do, again, on the website, envisioncontracosta2040.org, there is something that is called the online briefing book. And that has a way of viewing a lot of the data. In terms of making sharing data sets, that's certainly something that we'd be happy to discuss with county staff. For the moment, everybody can view the data that we're working with in terms of health issues, transportation infrastructure, the disadvantaged communities mapping that I showed as part of this presentation is on there. So that's available to view. And if you have specific requests about data sets, like the native GIS data or other types of data that you'd like to view, you can use that county website, or excuse me, the envisioncontracosta2040.org website to send us a request for those, and we'll be happy to respond.
Okay, and the next question noted that it's taken a while to revise these 4 planning documents, or it's taking a while. So when is the next scheduled revision after this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I had a clear answer for it. We haven't actually published any proposed revisions to the plans yet, so that is still forthcoming. But we are already working on the process of looking through the plans, Right now, we're focusing on the existing policies and programs and the strategies. I'm speaking right now about the general plan in particular, to focus on updates we already know need to happen. And then the next phase of that will be starting to filter in some of the ideas from these kinds of conversations that we're having now. So I think that's really going to be happening over the course of the rest of the year. But I apologize because I don't have a specific answer for you on when we're going to have public documents ready to share. That's still something that we're trying to get a handle on. And Jody, I don't know if you want to say anything, or Tammy, more specific about the climate action plan schedule.
The climate action plan, because the documents are all going to be part of the same environmental impact report, they're going to be moving at the same time. We did, there is posted on the website, Envision Contra Costa 2040, the draft goals and strategies that we're looking at right now. And so I'd be happy if people want to look at those. I'm happy to hop on a phone call with you or your group to talk that through a little bit more. And we're also, I just should say that we are very focused with the climate action plan on accountability and having a dashboard right now. The 2015 climate action plan is not, it's not super easy to track progress. So I've been working internally with county departments to talk with the different staff about, you know, how are they going to measure and make sure that they're building in tracking progress as part of their business process. So a lot of what I heard from the community resonated in terms of what we've been thinking about already. And several members of our Sustainability Commission have been participating today, which is great because they are also holding me very accountable. They do a great job on that. And their next meeting, by the way, is on June 3rd at 5 o'clock in the evening. It will be a Zoom meeting, details to follow.
Okay.
The answer all
Joanna,
looking for
Yeah,
there.
go ahead, Will.
I'd like to interject as well about the timeline to, and I'm sorry, Jody, if I cut you off. Were you finished? Okay. The timeline for, you know, when will these documents be updated again? Well, the general plan that we're preparing is a 20-year document. So 2040 is the next time that we would look at a comprehensive overhaul of the document. Because I think that was the question, part of the question.
Okay, I apologize if I misunderstood the whole nature of the question.
Right. So 2040 is when we're, this is a 20-year general plan that we're working on. The zoning code, you know, presumably would, we would take another look at the same time. I can't really predict what's going to happen 20 years from now, but it seems logical. And of course, along the way, though, there's statutory changes that are required to the general plan. The world changes. It's not meant to be a static document. So there will be general plan amendments along the way, of course, and zoning changes as well. But there's actually no timeline, mandated state timeline or requirement to update your general plan on a certain schedule, other than for the housing element, which is updated every 8 years, and that will be updated in a couple years and then 2030.
Thanks, Will. What else, Tanya?
Okay, so we have some questions about the climate action plan. So this is a good segue and related items. So if the county creates a code to a standard for energy efficiency for buildings, are refineries included in those buildings that must comply?
I'm gonna let a county staff person tackle that.
I do not know the answer on the refinery piece, but I did want to say that we are, well, we were before the pandemic looking at a REACH code around building electrification for certain buildings. So, you know, things have just gotten thrown off right now. I don't know if Will, you or someone else can answer the question about refineries being included. I really just don't know the answer.
You know, I don't know the answer. It's more of a building code question, which is not my area of expertise. But you know, the units, what it goes into a refinery, of course, is very different than, say, an apartment building. And so it's all industrial facilities, these processing units, there, you can't have an insulation requirement on something that doesn't have insulation. Or where do you attach solar panels to something like a smokestack or tanks, that sort of thing. So, I don't want to say anything that is not accurate, because I don't know the building code inside and out, but it seems like it's a very different animal than something like a warehouse or housing or a mall or something like that.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've gone significantly over, and so I think what we're going to do is take one more question here, and then for all of the other questions that we didn't get answered, we'll prepare written responses and we'll post those on the website, and all of the participants, you will get an email with a link to those written responses within a few days. So I'll go ahead and pose the last question, which is on a similar topic. Asking, sorry, where did it go? Oh, will the climate action plan measure consumption emissions and airport emissions?
I'm going to ask Tammy, if she's still on, if she could answer that question, please.
You bet. So we are not preparing what's referred to as a consumption-based inventory for the county. There is not a standard protocol in the state of California for preparation of those types of inventories. The state does not even have a consumption-based inventory for which we would build from. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District a couple years ago contracted with UC Berkeley to prepare one for the Bay Area. So we do have that available to us as a reference. And we will be able to include it as an informational content in the climate action plan and ensure that we have policies that respond to consumption-based emissions, but we may not be able to quantify in the same way that we would for those emissions that are included in our standard protocol compliant inventory.
And I would just note that in the presentation deck that's posted on the Envision Contra Costa County website from the meetings we did in the fall, we actually had a slide that talked a little bit about consumption-based inventory, because I understand the concern there as well. I should also note that our Public Works Department has been asked to look into updating the county's environmentally preferable purchasing policy, and depending on how that work goes, could be an opportunity to think about life cycle, life cycle analysis and impact of county business and purchases.
Tanya, I think there was were there two parts to that question? Did we get both of them?
Airport emissions was part of that.
Thank you. I knew I missed that. I'm going to ask Eli. I mean, we do include small airport emissions to some degree if they are in the unincorporated county. At least for the on-ground operations, I believe they would get included. But Eli may want to correct or clarify that.
Yes, I can confirm that. Emissions associated with equipment use at airports in the unincorporated area, those will be included and are included in the greenhouse gas emissions inventory.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, everyone. As Tanya said, we've gone over the time that we had planned. So thank you very much for spending some extra time with us. We wanted to make sure that we got to hear from all of you and have a chance to answer a few more questions. But thanks again. This has really been very valuable for us as planners in the county. And I hope for you too, in understanding a little bit more about this process and building some relationships with other interested stakeholders and with county staff. So thank you very much. We're going to sign off and hope you guys have a great evening.